Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is David with the first Black Ops 2 gameplay commentary on my channel. If you're listening to this, it means that you survived the 2012 apocalypse and you're now part of the survival movement. It's time to defy the odds and usher in a new beginning for humanity. Now after that lighthearted beginning to this commentary, let's move on to a more serious topic. I don't usually upload Call of Duty on my channel, but Call of Duty is most relevant to some topics being tossed around in the media, so I got the game during the Steam sale for PC. A quick note about the gameplay: I'm at a really low level and I don't have any of my unlocks, but I managed to pull off a pretty good score regardless, just messing around with the Vector and the combat knife. I'm not primarily a Call of Duty player, so you can't have really too high gameplay standards for my channel, and I'm also usually a player on console, so I'm at a disadvantage there because I'm not used to playing on PC. But regardless, I hope the background gameplay is good enough for the topic I really wanted to talk about today. I think we're far enough removed from some of the tragedies that have occurred this year, such as the Aurora, Colorado shooting, the Oregon Mall shooting, and the Newtown, Connecticut Sandy Hook shooting, that we can talk about some of these things in an objective light. As a psychology graduate, I felt there were some issues that I should weigh in on. There's a lot of talk being brought up associating video games with violent occurrences. Every time that tragedy happens on a massive scale, people begin asking, did violent video games play a role in the execution of these violent incidents? People have to focus on something, anything, as an easy scapegoat for what happens. People are lobbying for stricter gun controls, reenactment of the assault weapons ban, whatever. But there's also an equally outspoken group that wants to focus on the video game aspect. Jay Rockefeller, a senator from West Virginia, is trying to generate a bill for research to find a link between video games and violence. And Executive Vice President of the National Rifle Association, Wayne LaPierre, had this to say regarding violent media, and I quote, "And then they have the nerve to call it entertainment. But is that what it really is? Isn't fantasizing about killing people as a way to get your kicks really the filthiest form of pornography? In a race to the bottom, media conglomerates compete with one another to shock, violate, and offend every standard of civilized society by bringing an ever more toxic mix of reckless behavior and criminal cruelty into our homes, every minute of every day of every month of every year." It just seems that people who are high up in politics or in any sort of power position seem to have an agenda, a personal vendetta against games. A big example of this was Jack Thompson in the wake of the Virginia Tech shooting. Even when it was found that the shooter didn't actually play any video games before the shooting, Jack Thompson tried to lobby Congress for bans on video games. With all of the accusations being thrown around, let's take a second to step back and compose ourselves and look at hard research data. Then we can ask the question, do video games and other violent media cause violent behavior in individuals who have exposure to that media? The answer is most definitely no. Many studies have been done trying to find out a link, but I really honestly can't list any studies that can reliably point to video games making such a causal effect on later life violent behavior. Sure, video games have been shown to cause an increase in cognitive arousal and lower empathy for those around or those affected by the game, but again, it's hard to draw causality from these exposure to video game incidences and exposure to other violent media to later violent actions in life. With many positive studies that have cited video games as a cause for violence, they all lack validity or are methodologically flawed in execution, and they're egregiously hard to extrapolate outside of a laboratory setting. But there are many studies that argue to the contrary, that video games do not contribute to violence in healthy individuals, and I can cite a lot of these. Most relevantly, a Secret Service study was done that showed less than a quarter of violent shooting perpetrators had exposure to violent media or video games. Let's take a look at this statistic. In 2005, the United States had 2,279 murders committed by teenagers, 27.9 per million residents, compared to 73 in Japan. That's 3.1 per million residents. However, per capita violent video game sales were $5.20 in the United States compared to $47 in Japan. That just showed that even though violent video games popped up more in Japanese culture and media, Japan had a lower murder rate. At the end of the day, problems come out of individuals playing the game and not the game. If an individual is likely to be influenced to do violent actions after playing a video game, then that's their problem, not a problem with the game, and banning games would just be punishment for those healthy individuals that are playing games for entertainment. Regarding possible research on the subject, the data is always going to be correlational, and of course we can't draw causality from correlational data. This research topic is always going to be impractical and unethical to approach in an experimental method, meaning that you have direct control over the variables. So why then do people always want to explore games as a cause for violent behavior? There's a simple phenomenon in psychology called the illusory correlation, where two observations that are inherently unrelated are made to seem correlated using whatever criteria is available. And I use that word available to segue into my next topic called the availability heuristic. A heuristic is a cognitive shortcut that allows for reduction in mental processing load, and heuristics are in place for humanity to perform their day-to-day functions without having to think about every single small detail. Humanity is a very stereotype-driven organism. We form groups and thrive in them, and in order to do that, we have to have heuristics at play, and heuristics are good for the most part, but they can be blatantly wrong in other situations. With the availability heuristic, we anchor on things that we can easily think about, and it's unfortunate that violent video games and violent media are so commonplace in our culture that we can think about those things so easily whenever a mass shooting occurs. So with these heuristics mediating the illusory correlation, the correlation is not actually there, it's just an illusion more or less. And with these illusory correlations, self-fulfilling prophecies can happen regarding research and legislation. And it's also quite possibly a generational thing. When many researchers were younger, the games they played had pixelated blood, not photorealistic violence. But now these commonplace photorealistic violent games are a common part of our culture. But at the end of the day, it is the parents that decide to let the kids play the game. So don't blame the game. Blame the parents that allow the children to play the game and the person who decides to take a message portrayed in a game and act it out in real life. That has nothing to do with the game. That's just characteristics of the individual, which is what we should be focusing on. We should focus on the stronger and more consistent underlying factors of all these violent occurrences. We have to start thinking about early identification of those who may have a predisposition to more violence and better treatment for those who may have an inclination. We have to start urging more family care and family interaction and refinement of, some of the family values of those people who have caused mass shootings. Parents are the ultimate decision, again, as to whether their children get exposure to violent media or not. What else can we do to prevent mass shootings? The conversation will eventually come back to the touchy political subject of guns. I don't want to elaborate too much on guns this commentary because it's too political, but I just want to give this really quick tidbit. A lot of the weapons that were used were legally obtained. We cannot forget the initial purpose of a weapon is to take a life away from something. Regardless of intent, even though an argument can be made that guns don't kill people, crazy people with guns kill people because other people that didn't have guns couldn't stop them, guns are a tool that cause damage on a large scale. If those people didn't use guns, they wouldn't have been capable of the damage that they did cause and the tearing and sundering of the families affected. So that's just some food for thought. Maybe next commentary I'll talk more about guns and violence, but please share this commentary with somebody who is interested in psychology of video games or violence in video games in general. I hope that if you're still here, I've done enough to earn a like rating from you. I also hope that you'll subscribe to my channel for more content about psychology in video games. Have a great day, guys.